Order. And before we start, I do want to recognize Corey Tucker and thank him for the work he's done these last few weeks. And if we could take a moment to recognize Corey. I'd like to welcome you all to meeting number 5 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. As you know, the Board of Internal Economy requires that the committee adhere to health protocols, which are in effect until March 11th, 2022. And as the chair, I will enforce these measures, and I thank you all for your cooperation. As you know, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 24th, 2021. Few rules. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You may speak in the official language of your choice. At the bottom of your screen is the toolbar, and you may choose to hear floor audio, English, or French. The raise hand feature is on the main toolbar should you wish to speak, and a reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be muted. The committee clerk and I will maintain a speaking list for all members. We're delighted tonight to have from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, Dr. Michael Strong, the President, the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council, the President, Dr. Alejandro Adem, and from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, Dr. Ted Hewitt, the President, and Dr. Dominique Berube, Vice President, Research. We will begin with our witness testimony, and we'll begin with Dr. Michael Strong for 5 minutes, and when there's 30 seconds to go, I'll lift a card. Dr. Strong, over to you.
The connection is insufficient for interpretation.
Dr. Strong, and my apologies, Monsieur Blanchet.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Blanchet-Jonca.
To make sure that we've got translation. Can we try again?
The French sounds okay at my end. He might want to double check that his Zoom app is set to French.
Okay. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca, are you on the French channel?
Oui, je vous confirme que oui.
They stopped interpreting. They said that they couldn't interpret because the sound quality was too low.
Okay. Are we good to go now? How is the interpretation now?
Il n'y a aucune interprétation présentement. Parfait. Donc, on me confirme que ça sera disponible maintenant pour l'interprétation. On peut recommencer. Merci.
Dr. Strong, could you try again, please?
Thank you, Madam
minutes.
Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to thank the committee for the invitation to appear here today. It is a great privilege, both as CIHR's president and as a scientist, to join my colleagues in addressing the inaugural members of Canada's Parliamentary Committee dedicated to science and research. In the preamble to the Act, which established CIHR in 2000, Parliament recognized that excellence in health research is fundamental to improving the health of Canadians. CIHR has since endeavored to deliver on its mandate by investing in high caliber, peer-reviewed research and its translation into better health for Canadians. As we strive to build on our successes, we see an opportunity to modernize the concept of research excellence and address many of the challenges currently facing the research community and Canadians. An opportunity to firmly position Canada as a global leader in inclusive and collaborative science focused on real-world issues. The challenges of emerging health threats and a rapidly evolving world only underscore these imperatives. The current state of science and public investment in science is a subject that merits full attention. This committee's study is timely and extremely important in this regard. During the pandemic, for remarkable drive to develop vaccines against COVID-19. In fact, we know this achievement was built upon decades of research involving hundreds of people worldwide, including crucial contributions by Canadian scientists. What may have been less evident to many Canadians was how our research community truly rallied at the very onset of the pandemic, despite its destruction in our lives. They initiated urgent research, guided public health responses, and supported peer review as CIHR mobilized its rapid funding, becoming the first national agency in the world to launch an open call for COVID-19 research. CIHR has since invested over research and continues to fund studies on gaps and emerging priorities. I am also proud to say that in parallel, CIHR has continued to deliver its investigator-initiated research programs at full funding levels. This was critical. It is important to realize that there is no overnight success in science, but rather incremental steps forward, driven by hard work, collaboration, and sustained investment in both fundamental and applied research. This means supporting excellence across what we call the 4 pillars of health research: biomedical, clinical, and population health. Is targeting research to help governments and healthcare partners address a broad range of priorities, such as opioids crisis, mental health, climate change, and reduced health costs. As we emerge from the pandemic, CIHR is poised and uniquely positioned to contribute to building a healthier, more prosperous Canada. In January, we established the Centre for Research on Pandemic Preparedness and Health Emergencies to support ongoing research for emergency preparedness, prevention, recovery. Biomanufacturing and life sciences strategy. CIHR will soon launch a new clinical trials fund to strengthen Canada's bioinnovation pipeline. During the pandemic, CIHR also introduced it in our history. This plan outlined an ambitious vision for a healthier society built on research excellence. Our engagement with the community identified key challenges. For instance, how do we strengthen fundamental research while continuing to support strategic priorities? How do we define research excellence, and how do we ensure that research excellence is adequately supported in Canada? How do we ensure that the best scientific evidence is quickly put into the hands of those who can use it? And how do we bridge the so-called valley of death in innovation so that discoveries in Canada lead to successful commercialization and to new solutions for Canadians? Our strategic plan looks to address these themes and others, for instance, by better integrating evidence into health decisions through knowledge mobilization and learning health systems, where patients, health professionals, managers, and scientists embedded in the health system work together to determine where the problems lie and what the solutions should be. While strengthening investigator-initiated research, the cornerstone of medical science. Moving this vision forward will require a vibrant, globally competitive research community.
Madame la Présidente, désolé, M. Strong, il y a des difficultés avec la connexion. L'interprétation a coupé depuis 4 fois depuis le discours de M. Strong. Est-ce que vous pouvez me confirmer que la connexion de M. Strong a été validée?
Can you confirm that the connection for Mr. Strong has been verified since the start of the meeting?
Dr. Strong, and thank you, Monsieur Blanchet-Jonquet. We have validated it. We're not sure where the connection issue is happening, and we apologize. I think we're best to allow Dr. Strong to finish his last 30 seconds. Is that agreeable to the committee? And Dr. Strong, over to you for 30 seconds.
Merci. Moving this vision forward will require a vibrant, globally competitive research community. It will require us to continue to work hand in hand with our partners. With our tri-agency colleagues, we will continue to enhance collaboration and harmonization. We will work with collaboration with organizations in the private, charitable, and public sectors, and we will continue to advance cutting-edge research and support innovation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And with that, we will go to Dr. Alejandro Adem from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, and we hope the interpretation is back by then.
Thank you very much. Bonsoir à toutes et à tous.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak before your committee. I'm pleased to join my fellow the interpreter would like to mention that the sound is cutting out in the booth, making interpretation difficult.
Les possibilités dans le domaine des sciences au Canada. My name is Alejandro Adem, and I am the president of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, NSERC. I'm a mathematician currently on leave from a faculty position at the University of British Columbia. Before joining NSERC, I was CEO of MyTax, a nonprofit organization that builds bridges between academia and the private sector through student internships. I'm currently also serving as the chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee. I would be glad to discuss with you today or at a later date the important work that the CRCC is doing to collaboratively advance federal research priorities. Mais j'aimerais d'abord présenter le CRSR.
Interpretation is not possible due to a connection issue.
Depuis plus de 40 ans, le CRSNG joue un rôle essentiel à l'appui des sciences naturelles et du génie au
Sorry,
Canada.
Dr. Adem, we're going to suspend. I think we have got to sort out the interpretation problems. Can we suspend for a few minutes? Thank you.
Stop the clock.
Okay. Okay, so.
Starting right now? Yes? Okay. Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Je vous remercie.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting me to appear before your committee. I'm pleased to join my fellow Granting Council presidents to exchange with you on the successes, the challenges, and the opportunities for science in Canada.
I'm the president of the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, NSERC. I am a mathematician currently on leave from a faculty position at the University of British Columbia. Before joining NSERC, I was CEO of MyTex, a nonprofit organization that builds bridges between academia and the private sector through student internships. I'm currently also serving as the chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee. I would be glad to discuss with you today or at a later date the important work that the CRCC is doing to collaboratively advance federal research priorities. Mais j'aimerais d'abord présenter le SRSR.
I'd like to introduce you to NSERC and share with you some exciting work that we are doing for Canadians. Since 1978, NSERC has played a critical role in supporting natural sciences and engineering research in Canada.
Of discovery, research, and innovation, we also support creative public outreach activities, promoting the value of science and engineering and increasing science literacy among young Canadians. NSERC has two flagship programs: Discovery Grants to support fundamental research and training, and two Alliance Grants for university researchers partnering with private sector, public sector, or not-for-profit organizations. We also provide support to students and research trainees from undergraduates all the way through to postdoctoral fellows. In addition, NSERC partners with the other councils on important joint programs, such as the Canada Research Chairs, the Canada First Research Excellence Fund, and the highly interdisciplinary New Frontiers in Research Fund. During the past year, NSERC has invested $1.4 billion to support over 12,000 researchers and over 33,000 trainees at universities and colleges across Canada. NSERC supports 75% of all natural science and engineering researchers in Canada. Our partnership programs have connected academics to thousands of partners in industry, government, and the nonprofit sector. We support research at institutions of all sizes across Canada, as research excellence occurs in every corner of our country. Our trainees go on to positions in academia, government, and the private sector, where a STEM background provides them with critical skills for today's technologically advanced society. Over the years, the support that NSERC has provided for fundamental research has yielded important technologies and solutions that have benefited Canadians. Areas such as artificial intelligence, quantum science, clean technology, biomedical engineering, etc., have been incubated and then mobilized thanks to the steady support of our discovery and applied research programs, which support ideas and innovation in all the areas of natural sciences and engineering. And we
work in close cooperation with other organizations that are funding bodies, and we are in fact proud to work with departments and other federal organizations to promote sciences.
With departments like Environment and Climate Change Canada, Fisheries and Oceans, and Agriculture Canada to fund collaborative efforts between federal scientists and the academic community. Examples include research on forest fires, plastic pollution, and food security. NSERC plays a critical role in understanding and developing solutions to climate change, spending over $200 million annually to support research in environmental sciences, renewable energy, sustainable electric vehicle batteries, carbon capture and storage, and much more. We're also helping Canadian researchers push the boundaries of knowledge through international partnerships. For example, NSERC and the U.S. National Science Foundation recently announced a joint initiative on quantum science and artificial intelligence.
Now we focus on the economic recovery following COVID-19.
October, we launched the NSERC Alliance Missions Grants to address critical science and technology challenges to create benefits for our economy. And the College and Community Innovation Program, which supports applied research partnerships between colleges in all regions of the country and SMEs, is generating innovative solutions to local and regional business challenges. Our agency is committed to the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion, seeking to address the underrepresentation of many groups in STEM fields so that all Canadians can benefit from science and innovation. Madame la Présidente, ce ne sont là que quelques exemples.
Madam Chair, those are a few examples.
Dr.
La
Dem.
recherche et les chercheuses. Merci.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adam. And now we will go to Dr. Ted Hewitt, the President of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. Over to you for 5 minutes.
Okay, bonsoir, Madam Chair. Thank you for your invitation to appear before this committee and also for your longstanding leadership in science and research. And I'll just stop at this point to check that I am being heard well and the sound is working and the translation. Correct? Okay. I'm very proud to appear before you today as president of the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council since 2015. But I'm also a career academic working in Canada and internationally, including for many years as a senior university administrator, principally in the research field. In these various roles, I've had the privilege to observe from different perspectives the many changes in the Canadian research system that have occurred over the past 3 decades.
Important investments have been made in national research programs, and they have created a solid basis to attract and retain talented individuals in Canada. And this has allowed us to improve research in Canada and to give us the necessary investments to improve research. The investments that have happened recently have ensured the prosperity of this sector.
Today is robust. It's a system that rests on 3 key pillars which are critical to its stability and success. First, of course, is the research itself, the projects, the formulation, the execution of research plans. Second are the people. Not just the researchers, but the new talent that's being developed at all levels in the system. And third are the research tools, the buildings, the infrastructure, the equipment. And thanks to investments in a good balance of fundamental and strategic research over the past several decades and enhanced coordination within the research enterprise in recent years, within the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, I believe that Canada is increasingly well served in all 3 of these pillars. Could the system be strengthened? Absolutely. The research enterprise and society have awakened to the critical need to break down the real barriers that exist to equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples through strengthening Indigenous research capacity and research training. We must continue to advance multidisciplinarity as well, and international collaborations, and effective channels to mobilize research knowledge, because we need the contribution of all Canadians to generate, deliver, and share research if we're going to avoid jeopardizing innovation, technologies, commercial products, and sound public policy. À titre de président de SRSR, je tiens à souligner à quel point la recherche en sciences humaines joue un rôle essentiel dans l'optimisation.
I want to say that this type of research is really important to promote science. Humanities and social sciences involve many areas that all improve human life. Innovation is not only a patent issue. Commercialization and adopting new technologies are human factors in which human sciences play an important role. Science and technology do not happen alone. No more than they decide their future. It's the people that are behind them. And that's why social sciences and humanities allow us to understand other humans and societies better.
And social sciences and humanities research is helping address some of the most critical challenges we face as a society, domestically and globally, be it pandemic recovery, economic growth, environmental sustainability, affordable housing, reconciliation. Fundamentally, it's about building and sustaining a just and prosperous society. People are at the heart of what drives our future. We are well positioned to build and capitalize on Canada's strength across the disciplinary array, in the social sciences and humanities in particular, to build the Canada that we want and we need for today and tomorrow. Merci.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. Thank you to all our witnesses for your time, your expertise, your effort. We will now go to questions from members, and this is a 6-minute round, and we will begin with Ryan Williams from the Conservative Party for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And through you, I'm going to go to our first scientist, Dr. Strong, and thank you very much for your opening statements. In your opening statement, you talk about funding research to reduce healthcare costs. Canada right now has the 5th largest, highest per capita spending of healthcare in the OECD, yet we're not getting anywhere near a good bang for our buck. We have the longest wait times in the OECD, and we're dead last in doctors and ICU beds per capita in the G7. Could you expand a bit on the results from the research that actually reduce our healthcare costs?
Dr. Strong.
Madam Chair, I thank the member for the question. I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo. Are you getting one as well?
Dr. Strong, you're okay this time. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, in fact, CIHR does conduct research in one of its pillars directed specifically to health outcomes and investments to look at how is the healthcare system improved, not just during the period of the pandemic, but also prior to that. So looking at what are the best ways to ensure that procedures that are put into place need to be done, can be done efficiently, and are done well within the facilities that are available for them. So an example of that would be research that's been recently released, looking at just the types of processes that need to move forward for surgical intervention, which ones require in-hospital work, which ones can be done in a lower acuity setting. And that's helping to drive reduced costs for us. So we do, in fact, conduct research in that area and are helping to influence those costs. Thank you for the question.
Okay, thank you very much. And through you, Madam Chair, to Dr. Strong again. With publicly funding research institutions accounting for 80%, I think maybe it's higher, it might be closer to 90% of the intellectual property created in Canada, how can we drive innovation and downstream commercialization if the players are so heavily dependent on federal funding?
Madam Chair, again, I thank the member for that question. It's a crucial one at this moment in time. And it, in fact, actually speaks to the biomanufacturing and life sciences initiative that's being built coming out of the pandemic to strengthen our ability to, in fact, create that pipeline and then sustain it in a long term so that ideas, research that find their initial formulation within the laboratory are well supported, moved through the clinical trials networks, scaled up appropriately, and the IP maintained within Canada so that the trials are done here and then the answers used to benefit Canadians. So it is a fundamental investment that has been done to address exactly that question of ensuring that we maintain IP in Canada for innovation's purpose.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. My next question, again to Dr. Strong. In your 10-year strategic plan, what were your solutions to bridging the commercialization valley of death, as you called it?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, I appreciate the question. So the Valley of Death is actually populated by a number of different issues that need to be addressed. The first is to ensure that the funding is in place to ensure that the development of the research ideas are there to begin with. But also, there is a need to ensure that there is a deeper association with industry so that as we're training our next set of graduates, as we're conducting the research experiments to look at this, that we have a vision or an eye on getting across that valley. So what is needed by industry to ensure that the ideas that are brought forward can be operationalized and move forward? To do that, you need to have industry involved at the very early stages as well. And so, again, returning to the biomanufacturing initiative, as an example of that, this is something that is tightly being interwoven at the very beginning of research to try and understand how do we, in fact, support this better. So it's incremental change, but it's at multiple different steps.
Okay, thank you, sir. And I'm sorry for ganging up on you. I have one more question for you, Dr. Strong. You mentioned Funding to strengthen Canada's bio initiative pipeline. I assume that is funding for both university and private sector research. Maybe you can confirm that for me. And what is expected from public and private sector split between applicants? So what is expected between the split between those?
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, appreciate the question. It's very timely and appropriate. And again, I will return to the biomanufacturing strategy and life sciences strategy that's embedded with that, because it's a good example of knitting together across multiple different departments and agencies the capacity to actually see something carried all the way through an engagement of corporate entities. So as the CIHR, we are part of that, but so are my colleagues here at the table, as well as I said, in terms of helping with commercialization and NRC. So for us, the role for CIHR is to ensure that the investment is there at several different layers. The first, the early discovery component, and to encourage, working with my colleagues here through the Tri-Agency Fund, that industry is brought in as partners very early on, as well as the private sector. Then moving into the clinical trials component to support that and to do the evaluative component, that needs to be done with industry as well. And the final piece is a rigorous training programs to ensure that the next generation of researchers that we develop who understand this pipeline, understand it in the context of working with public partners to make it successful. So it's a very broad strategy, and each of us owns a piece of it.
Thank you, sir. And right on time, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Hi, Mr. Williams. Thank you. And now we will go to Ms. Diab for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome to all our witnesses to this historic committee. Glad to have you there. Just going to direct my first question to Dr. Adam. You, as current chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee, I think you mentioned in your remarks you'd like to expand a little bit on that, but can you let us know the importance of increased coordination for improving research ecosystem in Canada, whether you think there's progress made in that front, what else you would like to see happen, what else can we do to sort of increase, to have more of that going on? Because we've heard from past witnesses before how crucial it is to have coordination and to have partnerships among the government and the different sectors.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me say that, I started in this job in 2019, and the first day I started, we had dinner, the three of us, together with the president of CFI, and it's been a remarkable journey, especially given the pandemic. And the councils and CFI work very closely. They have meetings every week, and we work additionally on issues of substance through the Canada Research Coordinating Committee. I think it's extremely important that the different councils, different funding agencies work together. And in fact, I think there are significant areas where we collaborate almost freely and practically as one unit. For example, with SHRC, we share the administrative backbone. It's the same one for both agencies. And the tri-agency programs deliver a whole slew of programs for the three agencies at the same time. Now, the Canada Research Coordinating Committee has had a really wonderful effect to bring us even closer together and to harmonize our activities. And I can mention a few of the accomplishments of this committee. So we have the three agencies plus CFI, plus NRC, the Chief Science Advisor, and the Ministry ISED, the Deputy Minister of ISED, and the Deputy Minister of Health there. And among our accomplishments, which I can just list very quickly for you, we developed an innovative new interdisciplinary program called the New Frontiers in Research Fund. And you will have seen the rollout of some of the recent transformation grants. Fantastic work on spinal cords, creative new materials, environmetrics, all sorts of different things, amazing programs. Action plans that provide a foundation for ongoing interagency collaboration supporting early career researchers and greater equity, diversity, and inclusion in the research community. These are key interests of the science and innovation communities. The implementation of Canada's first strategic plan, co-developed with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples to guide new models for supporting Indigenous research and research training. And if I may say so, we also developed the Canada Research Continuity Emergency Fund that helps sustain 32,000 people ineligible for CERB, ensuring the continuity of 22,000 vital research projects. We also have a number of international initiatives, in particular one on climate change, which is going to be truly interdisciplinary. So it's not perfect, but there's a huge progress being made and a very harmonious collaboration between the agencies.
Thank you. Let me just, I don't know how many minutes we have left, but let me just hone in on the question, and you mentioned it, support for early career researchers and graduate students. Would you say they're getting, I don't know, their proportion of the overall research funding in Canada? What can we do to better support them? Do you think it's different in depending on the discipline or the field they're into? Can you shed some light on that?
Sure. So, when people ask me about what the funding for research, where it goes to, I'll tell you, primordially it goes to people, to students and trainees. I think it's around 3/4 of the funding for NSERC goes to people. So it's very important that they be adequately supported. Now, obviously, areas such as computer science, electrical engineering, these are very competitive areas where the marketplace has a lot of demand, require competitive offers. So I myself, as a professor at UBC, we struggle to make offers that are competitive when competing with universities in the UK, in Europe, in the US. Okay, so I think it's important for us to maintain competitive stipends and support for students, and we certainly all agree on that. And Canada has so much to offer as a country. Universities are such wonderful institutions, such centers of knowledge and innovation. So it is important for us to support these young people as best we can.
Perfect, thank you. And Madam Chair, do we have time? I can't see you on the screen.
Quick 1 minute left, Ms. Diab.
Perfect, thank you. Dr. Hewitt, I'll ask you a quick question. I know you were the inaugural chair, I guess, of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee. Do you see differences in terms of, particularly from when you started till now, and given the COVID, and what else can we do to support our researchers?
I would say, and thank you very much for that question, and it was an honor and a privilege to take on that role. But based upon where we started, the measures that we've taken and put into place over these past few years have been remarkable. We do have a report that we published just this year that we can certainly pass along to the committee that lists some of those accomplishments. But just in terms of the work that we did in equity, diversity, and inclusion, for example, across the agencies, the changes that were made to the Canada Research Chairs Committee that went through the CRCC, who were involved all the way, programming we put in place
Dr.
to harmonize
Hewitt.
support for early career researchers,
Dr.
and I
Hewitt.
could go on and on.
Sorry, thank you. Sorry to interrupt. I got it. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hewitt. We will now go to
Madam
Monsieur...
Chair. Can we ask that those reports be sent to the committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Diab. Absolutely. And now we will go to Monsieur Maxime Blanchette-Joncar for 6 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to welcome the witnesses that are joining us to participate in tonight's study. My first question, Madam Chair, will build on what my colleague has just said with regards to the Research Coordination Committee that was founded in 2017. My question is for Mr. Strong. In Quebec, we brought together 3 funds that support research in 2011. So it's been over 10 years. So we have the Quebec Research Funds. Have you discussed with your partners in Quebec what they feel about bringing these funds together?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, member, for that question. Yes, indeed. We have very close. So with Remy Kirion, who's a colleague who really chairs the FRSQ, the funding agency that's in place, we've had a number of conversations over the course of the last several years with regards to the successes that he has seen by bringing those entities together under one roof. It has allowed a number of advantages that he sees in place with regards to the ability to bring more broadly based policies in with regards to open science and so on with all of that. So in direct answer to your question, yes, we have had conversations with him and worked very closely in a number of our program developments.
Merci beaucoup. J'aimerais
Thank you. I'd like to hear the other witnesses talk about this exact question. Mr. Adem, maybe you can answer?
Well, I think the model of Quebec is certainly a very interesting one, and that coordination, I think, has some very positive aspects. On the other hand, the range that our agencies have is quite enormous. I myself, as a mathematician and a physical scientist, I would not feel qualified to make judgments about humanities and much less about medical sciences. And I know that in the day, I have to make decisions where my knowledge of the field, the fact that I am an academic with a certain background allows me to have that view. Also, I may say Canada is a very broad country, and there are different points of view in across all the provinces in the country. And so we tend to always go towards a confederation model where we put together the diverse points of view and work together. So what I see emerging is the close collaboration that we have among the agencies, creating that sort of role that Dr. Guillaume has, in the sense that we are constantly in touch, we're working together, and we have a number of joint initiatives. But we also have that diversity when it comes to issues, for example, of technology, in the case of what we talk about in the natural sciences, or these deep health issues that Dr. Strong talks about, or the social sciences, humanities. I think we need to have that expertise, and some differentiation, I personally think, is valuable. Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for the question. Thank you, Dr. Adam. Dr. Hewitt, can you tell us if you see an advantage to bringing together these research funds nationally? Yes, thank you for the question. At the end, the Québécois Research Fund is not very different from the federal structure. There are 3 agencies brought together under one roof. That's true. The fact that Quebec is a different environment compared to Canada at large. There are different communities, different language, different whatnot. But the 3 disciplines are also different. It's necessary to attend to their needs through these 3 agencies. It's working well. Mr. Adem mentioned it as well. Another thing is that we have 3 agencies that work well, and they are managed by one group. We spend a lot of money on individual programs to support the various disciplines in Canada. And this affects all sectors. At the end of the day, we have a system that is similar to the Quebec system, but that has advantages that allows us to support various communities here in Canada.
aller sur un autre sujet concernant les critères.
Over to Dr. Strong. You talked about EDI. We understand that those are individual things, for individuals, really. So I want to know, do you apply the same criteria to organizations? I'm referring to geographic inequity. I'm thinking of researchers in an urban area versus a rural area. Could you tell us, do you have criteria that allow you to be more balanced between urban and rural settings?
Please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, I appreciate the question very much. That's So the core of the question is, in fact, a very, very good one. As we've begun to look more carefully at bringing forward EDI, equity, diversity, inclusiveness, anti-racism principles into all of our granting processes, we are very, very much aware that there are regional differences, urban versus non-urban, that are in play with all of that. We are in the process right now of actually reaching out to those communities through a very deep consultation process for those with lived experiences to help guide us into what our policies should look like, to guide our grants even further along those lines. So that's actually happening as we speak now, through national committees, people raising their voices, doing through webinars
Dr.
to give us that
Strong,
information.
it's so interesting. I'm sorry to move on. Thank you for that answer. And
well, thank you. Thank you all for being here. And as usual, you know, I have enough questions to spend the entire night here, but we don't have that time. So I'm going to start, try to pick up on a point that Ms. Diab mentioned a few minutes ago, and that was about, you know, we've heard a lot about how at the core of all this is people, you know, and especially the new talent, they call it. And, you know, and these are students, basically, grad students who are entering the research field, and we really want to help them grow in their knowledge, and we want to keep them here in Canada. But what I've been hearing whenever I've talked to researchers and students is one of the programs that has fallen behind over the last few years is the student scholarship programs that the Tri-Councils administer. And I just, completely coincidentally, I just came from a meeting with the Canadian Alliance of Students Associations, and they had this ask as well. They looked at what that scholarship program provided at its peak, and they said we really should get back to that, and they pointed out that it would cost about $120 million additional each year to get it back to where it was. And perhaps I can start with Dr. Adem to comment on that. I mean, all the councils administer it, but if we could start with NSERC and just say, where are we with supporting these students? Because that's really at the basis of all this.
Thank you for that question. Madam Chair, if I may answer, yes, indeed, the people are at the core of what we do, and it's very important to provide adequate support for the trainees, and we're talking about undergraduates, graduates, and postdocs. So keeping the stipends and the rates competitive is certainly something which is important for us to do. Canada has to invest in its young people, and keeping track of how things develop over time, the erosion through cost of living increases is something which indeed has been brought to our attention by groups of students and some researchers too. So I think it's an issue that we face, but every country faces that because there's a worldwide competition for talent. It's not enough to say Canada is a great country to live in. We really have to put resources on the table to attract the best student from India, the best student from Pakistan, the best student from Africa. So it's very important that we offer competitive stipends and support our students adequately. And now usually it's a combination of resources that is used, funding from the agencies. There can be a teaching assistantships and other sources. But I think all of us recognize that this is a stress point for our system.
Well, thank you. Yeah, just as long as the Tri-Councils, you know, see this as a problem and something that has to be renewed, get back to where it was at least. I want to switch this up and now turn to Dr. Strong again. You touched on IP and innovation, keeping that within Canada. And one of the big issues, of course, we've been hearing about for the last 2 years is vaccines. We used to have a government lab that produced vaccines in Canada. I think we would have been well served if we had that at the start of this pandemic. But we seem to, keeping that IP in Canada and keeping it preferably within government. I have a friend, Dr. Tony Holler. He had a company, ID Biomedical. They developed a flu vaccine, and of course it was sold to a multinational, GlaxoSmithKline. I don't know the details of what that company is doing or where they used to have labs in Quebec, I know. But that seems to be the path of Canadian companies and Canadian IP, and I'm just wondering if you could back up and provide a bit more detail on what we can do to keep that valuable, essential IP and production within Canada.
Yes, Madam Chair. Again, I thank the member for the question. Again, is very timely. And the answer to that really stems from what we've learned in the course of the pandemic about the need to ensure that we have the infrastructure in Canada to be able to fully synthesize and be self-sufficient with respect to vaccine production. And in reality, a number of other agents that would be required for other therapeutic interventions over time. And so the investments that are in the process of being made at this time, and again, I refer back to the biomanufacturing initiative, but also specifically to the CIHR and the tri-agency's role in this, has been very much to begin to design the programs that will start at the very early part of this to ensure that the actual ideas that are synthesized here in Canada, that the research is done within Canada, the IP is protected, that the partnerships with industry are in place. But then when it comes to the point of scaling up and being able to do the actual synthesis, this is an area where our colleagues at ICED have been doing massive investments in order to ensure that we have the capacity for fill and finish. So the lesson learned from the pandemic really has been that Canada needs to have a steady state of capacity that will allow us to ensure that we can produce vaccines or other therapeutics without having to be relied on other countries to do so. So it is the pipeline that needs to be constructed, and the resources have been provided to us to start the foundations of that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cannings, and to Dr. Strong. This is such excellent testimony, and the questions are really good from our members, and we have experts here. Might I suggest we do an extra 5 minutes to make up for the 5 minutes we've lost, and to be fair, to do 2.5 minutes to each party? Okay, so with that, I will go, is it to Mr. Soroka then for 2.5 minutes?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Mr. Strong, I guess Mr. Canning and I are sitting too close to each other because we kind of had the same question. And I wanted to talk about there was a lot of research being done on the COVID to create a vaccine. And yet it seemed like this government decided not to fund universities any further and went for the big medical or the pharmaceutical companies. So my question is it purely because we didn't have the manufacturing capabilities, or do you feel that they didn't value our research, or is it because we wouldn't be recognized across the world by making our own vaccine at home?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and member for the question. Indeed, it's a very good one. It actually is a broader combination of issues than what you've delineated. In the early days of the pandemic, it was important to really quickly be able to scale up and get vaccines into the arms of Canadians. And that is a capacity that did not reside within Canada to do that. So hence the partnering with pharmaceuticals to be able to bring that to the table for Canadians rapidly. But Canadians, we made a massive investment at CIHR alone, over $300 million. But if you looked across all of our agencies, close to almost $800 million of funding into research from very basic, right from therapies, best interventions to new nucleotide therapies and so on. So we made the investments really rapidly into the basic research to try and pay the dividends, but we needed to bridge that. And that's where the pharmaceuticals came in. So it was a strong vote of confidence in our academic centers and the ability for them to turn on a dime to produce that.
It's a follow-up question, though. It seems like everyone wants to say, I've got a Pfizer, I've got a Moderna, or whatever company you want to put in there. Do you think there's still going to be the same recognition if it's made just in Canada worldwide or not?
Thank you very much for the question, Madam Chair. I do think that the recognition, this is a worldwide effort to deal with the SARS-CoV-2 and the next coronavirus that will come along. And so all countries are working very, very hard to develop vaccines, to understand new ways of therapies, to block the receptors. And so I would say that irrespective of what country, and that includes Canada, it will be celebrated worldwide as we develop these. So I think we're in a very strong position with very good research in Canada to be amongst that group. And I see it every day through the results coming across our desks.
Does that time?
It is, Mr. Soroka. Thank you for your questions. And now we will go to Mr. McKinnon for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to switch away from talking about downstream innovation and commercialization and turn to the headwaters of research, which I believe is fundamental research and pure research. I think one of the characteristics of pure research is we don't necessarily know what's going to pan out, whether an idea is a good one or not, until way down the road. So, how do we make sure that we adequately support fundamental research, and how do we decide what off the cuff, sort of off the wall sort of research is worth supporting? And I will direct that, I guess, to start with Dr. Adam, please.
Thank you very much for the question. Indeed, Blue Skies research is essential for the health of science and innovation. Everything comes from an idea. The ideas are the ones which are then mobilized to produce well-being for society. I myself, as a mathematician, everything we do is about ideas and very abstract ideas. So the whole point, I think, about fundamental research is that we do not choose the winners. It is the scientific method that is developed and the participation of peer review, the scientific community evaluating proposals in an open intellectual discussion that then results in appropriate funding for these projects. And I'm very proud of the Discovery Grant program that we have at NSERC, where we fund thousands of researchers working on Blue Skies research, which is, we're really investing in people and in their ideas. And afterwards, these ideas might be mobilized into an application, into interdisciplinary activities, but it really is, I think, at the core. And I myself moved to Canada because of the strength of its funding system and the Discovery grants program, because in areas such as mine, it really is unique in the world. So that point is well taken. And in our consultations with the community, invariably we hear that that is the bedrock of science and research in Canada.
I guess I'm still kind of concerned about what
Mr.
sort
McKinnon,
of...
Mr. McKinnon, that's the 2.5 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you to Dr. Adam. We'll now go to Monsieur Maxime Blanchet-Jeancat for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Hewitt, I want to understand what's entailed in the funding provided by the three councils. I think the funding is based on 40-40-20. I'd like to know from SRSR's point of view, say you get 15% less over the past 30 years, if I understood correctly. Where does the 40-40-20 come from? And why does your council get 15% less than other councils?
Excellent question. I've already spoken to the former minister on this subject. Currently, the split is 22, 38, 38. So we've gained a little bit. But we also participate in the tri-agency program to increase the proportion of available funds for humanities researchers. It's very important. But the value, I agree, is is greater than what we recognize currently when we look at the funding split. But I will persist in my discussions with the government to increase this proportion, but also to increase the overall amounts that are available for the 3 agencies in the research sector. Thank you for the question. It's much appreciated. It's a pleasure, Dr. Hewitt. I think we agree that we should increase the overall amount. Can you tell us, is there more information on the funding that is allocated to the agencies? Can you repeat the question? Do you have any more recent data? You mentioned that the proportion allotted to your council has increased. Do you have any data that speaks to it? Yes, absolutely.
Very short answer.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So when is your data from, Dr. Hewitt? This data is available, and I can follow up with it after. I would appreciate a written response, Madam Chair.
Monsieur Blanchette-Jean-Cave, thank you for the questions. Really, this is just, you can see the interest in the committee in this subject area, and we're so grateful to our witnesses. We will go to Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes.
Well, thanks again. I'll try to be quick. We've heard a lot about the cooperation and collaboration between the granting councils. I'm just wondering how that works. You know, if I were a researcher trying to decide which of the councils to apply to. You know, I think of my friend Dr. Peter Cullis, who developed the lipid nanoparticles that are an essential part of the mRNA vaccines, working at UBC. Very basic research, but has some medical applications. I don't know whether Dr. Cullis applied to CIHR or NSERC, but is there some issues there, and how do you deal with them in the tri-councils? And I suppose anybody can answer. Dr. Adam, Dr. Strong, Dr. Hewitt has his hand up.
I think it's an excellent question, and I think for most researchers, they already know the answer. They know where they work. They know where their colleagues are. They know which agency they need to work with. But we have developed a couple of mechanisms to assist those folks whose work tends to fall across the agencies. I mean, one is through the New Frontiers in Research Fund, which has a strong interdisciplinary bent and which allows for projects to span across the research agencies. And there are other interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary funds as well that people can apply to, and there are programs within those funds. The one important thing I have to mention, though, is an initiative that was developed by the 3 agencies just recently to allow for researchers to apply to their normal agency where they would normally apply with highly interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary projects. And these are now managed through a system we call TAPER, which is the Tri-Agency Initiative for Merit Review or for Peer Review, where they can be assessed with reviewers from across the 3 agencies, and we've already had dozens of applications for that. So we're working hard to make this easier for folks to work across boundaries and across the 3 councils in a number of ways.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. I'd like to thank all our witnesses. This was tremendous testimony. We thank you for your time and your expertise, and I'd also like to thank our members for their work tonight. We will suspend to move to our second panel, and we thank you all. And we'd like to welcome you to this fifth meeting of the inaugural Standing Committee on Science and Research. We are looking forward to your testimony. We are grateful for your time, your effort, your expertise. And tonight we're pleased to have Dr. David Naylor, a professor at the University of Toronto, who's appearing as an individual. From Brock University, Dr. Tim Kenyon, Vice President Research. And from McMaster University, Dr. Karen Mossman, Vice President Research, and Dr. Jerry Wright, the Director of the Michael DeGroote Institute for Infectious Disease Research. And with that, we will go to Dr. Naylor, and you will have 5 minutes. And Dr. Naylor, I will present a yellow card when there's 30 seconds left.
Madam Chair.
Dr. Naylor,
Sorry, just procedurally, I know that we have a vote later, and I just wanted to find out whether we have unanimous consent, to go through to 8:20 and then adjourn at that point in time.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I will ask the committee, do we have unanimous consent to go through to 8:20?
Yep, unanimous consent in the Zoom and on the floor.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Mr. Collins, and to the committee, and over to Dr. Naylor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to start by acknowledging your steadfast support for science and research over the last number of years and the leadership role you played. It is greatly appreciated by the research community, I know. I also want to thank all the members present for their public service and for giving up yet another evening to the cause of your work, and indicate that I feel privileged to be here with you and hope to contribute usefully. One of the points I'd like to make off the top, highlighted as well by my colleagues who are presidents of the granting agencies, is that ultimately science and research, well, we focus on discoveries and we focus on downstream patents and the use of the ideas in civil society. Ultimately, it's about people. It's about the next generation of talent and equipping subsequent generations of Canadians to lead and to make a difference in our country and in the world, because what they get from advanced training and research, the discipline of science and scholarship, is a way of dealing with the world, of understanding it, of shaping the world, that makes a massive difference to how this country unfolds in the decades ahead. So it's an investment in the future. It's also an investment in excellence and equity. It's not a cost center. It bears enormous fruit, not just in terms of, if we think about it, commercialization or application, but because those individuals who are shaped by their participation in the research enterprise, whether they stay in the academy or move elsewhere into a whole variety of roles, make a huge difference to this country. And it's a blend of competition and collaboration that characterizes cutting edge research that I think is so important and in some ways very Canadian. That confluence of goals, of working together in common cause, but also seeking to excel, I think is very important. A great deal more I could say about where we are in terms of our funding situation. The competition is simply intense in ways that it's never been. So I simply want to wrap up by sharing some benchmarks. We have the huge COMPETE program happening in the great United States of America to our south. Germany is another peer nation, has had 3% annual increases in research funding for a decade and has now started a second decade of similar increases. That's 20 years times 3%, 60% add compounding. It's roughly 80% increase over that period. Obviously, the UK has also been investing and has provided excellent coordination through an oversight mechanism that looks more like Quebec than our current granting council mechanism. So everyone is in this game. Canada has done extremely well. We've had great leadership in so many ways, but the bar has been raised, and I think we have to meet it and ideally surpass it in the years ahead. That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Naylor, for your testimony and for being here. We will now go to Dr. Tim Kenyon, Vice President of Research at Brock University. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. and thanks for the opportunity to share some thoughts on science and research in Canada from my perspective in my role, some successes, challenges, opportunities, all at a very high thematic level. Of course, there are many things that could be mentioned here, but research in
Sorry,
Canada under training councils. You've heard from three of them, I think, just tonight, from SHRC, NSERC, and CIHR.
Dr. Kenyon,
Yes?
I'm going to stop you for a second and ask that you begin again. You were frozen and we missed what you had to say. Please start again.
Thank you. Yeah, that wasn't a technical glitch. I just personally freeze sometimes, so I'll try to keep that from happening. I thank you for allowing me to be here, and I'm going to speak about some successes, challenges, and opportunities for Canada in science and research, but all at a very high thematic level. So there are many things that could be mentioned here, but I'll begin by noting something that we do quite well in Canada. Research in Canada is well served by the four main federal granting councils, and that's SHRC, NSERC, and CIHR, who I believe you've heard from tonight, as well as the Canada Foundation for Innovation, which supports research and innovation infrastructure across all disciplines. These agencies, in my experience, are well managed. They're based on sound principles for supporting excellence in inquiry, with clear mandates and a close engagement with the research community. And while historically no element of the research and science ecosystem in Canada has done enough to address the exclusion of researchers who are Indigenous, Black, or otherwise of underrepresented groups, these federal granting agencies are now helping to coordinate and facilitate a more deliberate and outcomes-based approach to diversity in research. Their roles and resources can be expanded with confidence. Not because the agencies are perfect. I'm going to talk about something they could probably do a bit better, but because for agencies of their size, they are responsive to changing research needs and imperatives. Of the many opportunities that exist for science and research in Canada, I would mention both big science and small science. By big science, I simply note a key recommendation of the 2017 Fundamental Science Review, as compelling today as when it was written. Some infrastructure of critical importance to Canadian research is achievable only through committed federal support over its entire life cycle. Canada boasts a few such major research facilities that are represented directly in the federal budget, but we have not, at least not yet, capitalized on the opportunity to create a strategic system and long-term planning process for determining how major research initiatives are selected for that status. The Fundamental Science Review in its recommendation 4.7 proposed a way of doing so, but whether it's that way or some other way, the opportunity is for Canada to have a carefully considered implementation of national science and research facilities that enable extraordinary discovery and might address some of the generational challenges that face humanity. But what about small science? At least half of publicly funded university researchers in Canada work at universities that are considered medium-sized or smaller. And those outside the very few largest cities in Canada tend to be medium-sized or smaller. These institutions are the sites of research excellence by any measure. They make good on a mandate that includes contributing to science and inquiry of universal value and interest. But they also play an irreplaceable role in enhancing the economic, social, and cultural vitality of the regions in which they exist. Their partnerships are likelier to be local, critical to the aspirations of regional industry and business, and informed by an expert understanding of their community partners. They're also very efficient at generating one of the most important and reliable forms of research impact, the impact of teaching when conducted by experts actively engaged in research. As one study's authors put it, the many small approach increases the teaching research interface, and it increases total productivity. So another opportunity for research in Canada is to find ways to leverage the capacity of small to medium-sized research universities, at least in part, by ensuring that their virtues are counted as virtues and that they are appropriately resourced for that work. Thanks again. My job is literally better than a dream job because I get to facilitate the work of researchers doing things that I could not have dreamed of as a child. And I see Canada delivering on its ambitions to support great research and scholarship. But I think we can dream bigger still, and we may need to. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kenyon. We will now go to McMaster University for 5 minutes. I don't know if it's Dr. Mossman or Dr. Wright, or you're splitting the time, but you will have 5 minutes. Over to you, please.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, and thank you all so much for the invitation. My colleague, Dr. Jerry Wright, a renowned infectious disease expert and lead of Canada's Global Nexus and Biological Threats, and I are so very pleased to be here and to talk about one of our passions, science and research in Canada. The pandemic has given us pause, a forced opportunity, if you will, to reassess the science and research ecosystem in Canada. I'm saying this not only as the head of McMaster's research enterprise, but as a researcher whose lab has never been busier since March 2020. Canada is home to some of the brightest researchers in the world, and we have the capacity to achieve scientific breakthroughs to positively impact the world. From medicine to nuclear research, from combating climate change to pioneering the next generation of mobility, Canada has incredible and untapped potential. We need to ensure we seize and maximize this potential for the benefits of Canadians and citizens around the world. You've heard from previous witnesses about the challenges, and there are many, but we'd like to focus on the solutions and opportunities. In particular, we would like to offer a new model of research and development as a solution to overcome some of the barriers that we face. As one of Canada's most research-intensive universities, McMaster has long been at the forefront of innovation. Problem-based learning was developed at McMaster's Medical School before being exported around the world. We are home to Canada's only major nuclear research reactor, opened more than 6 decades ago by Prime Minister Diefenbaker in 1959. We were ahead of our time then, and we continue to be forward-thinking. Now, we are leading the way with Canada's Global Nexus for Pandemics and Biological Threats, an ecosystem of its own of pandemic preparedness. We see the Nexus model as a path forward for research in Canada, which can unlock our potential across the country. Canada's Global Nexus will be transformative for the advancement of Canada's science and research ecosystem. The research being undertaken goes beyond the science of vaccines and pandemics. It brings together the best minds from across the country, from public health, government departments, and relevant industries, and connects them with our research expertise. This ensures business, academia, and government are aligned and connected. They understand each other's needs, they support one another's work, and collectively mobilize the knowledge needed to benefit Canadians. Our model removes barriers and boundaries, co-locating experts from all sectors to capitalize on the benefits of collaboration and coordination. Canada's Global Nexus is already yielding results for Canadians, but there is so much more we can do. Previously, this committee had asked witnesses why Canada was the only G7 country unable to rapidly produce a vaccine. The simple answer is that Canada was not prepared at the beginning of the pandemic. Over the last 2 years, through partnerships, government support, and our vast reservoir of talent, Canadian-based organizations, including Canada's Global Nexus, have pivoted their research to begin clinical trials for COVID vaccines. Not only has Canada been able to catch up to our allies, but we are poised to surpass them. Indeed, our own inhaled vaccine, effective against COVID and other variants of concern, is currently in clinical trials. While we may indeed have lost the short game, we're by no means out, just the opposite, in fact. We know that with the right combination of funding and our ability to leverage Canada's existing expertise, we can win the long game. Through research, we can keep Canada competitive. As a country, we need to embrace the kinds of research that are the hallmark of McMaster: interdisciplinary, connected, and collaborative. We need to be creative to ensure we retain and attract the brightest thinkers. We have already been able to repatriate 3 top researchers back to Canada from the United States, improve IP development, and keep Canadians safe with made in Canada solutions. This will require not only federal investment, but new solutions and approaches, such as the Nexus model. Future federal investments need to be made with the view of leveraging expertise and partnerships. With that in mind, we are asking the federal government to partner with us to accelerate this new and unique platform. Advancing Canada's Global Nexus now will not only advance the rapid development of vaccines and other therapeutics, but will allow us to train the much needed HQP and create numerous jobs and business opportunities for Canadians. And importantly, it will provide the evidence on which our government leaders and agencies can develop policies and inform decisions. This is a model that Canadians should champion.
Dr. Mossman, I'm sorry to interrupt. I know there's a group of very eager members of Parliament that I know will want to ask further questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
And with that, we will now go to our round of questioning. And this is a 6-minute round, and we will be going to Tony Baldinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is good to have you back in the chair. To all the witnesses, thank you for being here this evening. And over the previous meetings, we've heard a number of witnesses talking about the importance of the ecosystem, foundation as being critical to science, research, and innovation. In fact, we've heard a number of the needs for greater, discussions on the greater need for harmonization, collaboration, and coordination. I'll go first to Mr. Naylor. In the fall of 2017, the Canadian Research Coordinating Committee was established, with a mandate of greater harmonization, integration, coordination of research-related programs and policies, to address issues of common concern. But at the same time, I know in the spring of 2017, there was also the Naylor report that talked about one of its recommendations was the creation of a National Advisory Council on Research and Innovation. And I'm just wondering, get your opinion. Is that do you believe that the creation or not the creation of that CRCC committee is essentially what you had been recommending or the Naylor report had been recommending?
Thank you very much for the question. We did recommend the creation of such a coordinating committee, and I think we're very grateful that the minister now and the chair moved quickly to get that established. The question I think that really needs some sounding across the country in the research community is whether or not the current structure is coordinating as well as might be hoped. I fully acknowledge that my colleagues have made progress. Things like TAPER, the streamlined peer review for transdisciplinary research, are impressive. I would note, however, that referring to the New Frontiers Fund, that was actually part of the budget, part of a budget that the minister and others brought down that anticipated that fund. So very important to understand that some of this is simply executing on that which was put in place from a transdisciplinary level. So that's that side of it. I would think that coordination function needs a close look. But part of the reason we recommended a second body, an oversight body, was for just that reason, to provide that court of sober second opinion on how things were evolving, but also from the standpoint of an ecosystem, to make sure that innovation was linked to the science and research. So this was to be a committee focused on research and innovation, not on research alone. So we see a need for both. Thank you very much. Sorry to go on.
Thank you. And one quick question to you. I also keyed in on your recommendation 411 about the government undertaking a comprehensive review to modernize and, where possible, harmonize the legislation of the 4 agencies. Are we aware, maybe even our chair as well, if that was ever done?
I don't think it was ever done, and I think you'll find that that might be something to be thought about if there were to be a review of how the coordination has gone. Obviously, the colleagues are collaborating very well. You don't want structure to supersede just good collaboration and common sense. but I still believe that that review is appropriate.
Well, thank you for that. I just find that, it's been 5 years and we continue to hear this notion of the ecosystem and needs for collaboration, harmonization. So I'm wondering if we're failing in some area. I mean, we've heard from certain witnesses, we're hearing the systems can be cumbersome, bureaucratic. In fact, one witness talked about the whole notion of a one-stop shop idea. But I'd like to go to Dr. Mossman now because unfortunately she didn't have a chance to finish. And on that whole notion about the ecosystems, and you talked about new solutions and approaches, and you talked about the Nexus model. So quickly, if you could just expand on that just a little bit, and then I'd like to get to our Brock University, Mr. Kenyon, as well for one question.
So the question is on the Nexus ecosystem. So the idea is to really pull together not just multidisciplinary across our universities, across multiple universities, across sectors with public health, and so that we have that coordination where we understand something like a pandemic is a very complex problem. It requires complex solutions. It requires that coordination, not just amongst academics, but with our industry partners, with our government partners, with our policymakers, so that we can really quickly understand what all of the issues are and rapidly mobilize all of the expertise that we have in all of these sectors across the country.
Latched onto your comments about the small science, the medium and smaller research taking place at some of these universities such as Brock, and I really enjoyed your line there about it enhancing the cultural and economic vitality of our communities and the impact that it has. I mean, down in Niagara, for example, I was wondering maybe you could expand upon the Cool Climate Oncology and Viticulture Institute and the establishment there and what it has meant to our grape and wine sector.
Thank you.
Short answer.
I'd be happy to.
Short answer.
Through you, Madam Chair. The Cool Climate Enology and Viticulture Institute is a great example of what we're talking about through programs like Vine Alert, which use sophisticated meteorological and real-time monitoring of grapevine bud conditions. This enables grapevine farmers to know when to turn on their wind machines in winter. Right now is a great example in order to reduce losses of grapevine to cold weather. And this enables them to save, conservative estimate, $1 million a year collectively in propane costs alone by not having to turn the machines on needlessly. Now, to put something like that in place, you have to be brilliant, you have to be creative, but you also have to be here.
But Dr.
If you're not
Kenyon,
here,
Dr. Kenyon,
you don't do it.
Dr. Kenyon, that was a short answer. And Mr. Baldinelli, thank you for your questions. And thank you to the witnesses who answered. And now we will go to Mr. Chad Collins for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I would like to direct my questions to Dr. Mossman and Dr. Wright from a parochial perspective, if you would. I think we've all learned through the pandemic that we've learned about the importance of making strategic investments in science and research. And it's these past investments that have been made in the field that have helped us get through the pandemic and get us to where we are today. And so I listened with interest about the Nexus project, and I thought I heard that the reference to an inhalable vaccine for COVID. And so I was wondering through you, Madam Chair, whether either Dr. Mossman or Dr. Wright could further elaborate on the Nexus model and the reference to the inhalable vaccine.
Sure, I can certainly take that. Thank you for the question. So the inhaled vaccine really builds on the expertise that we have at McMaster in adenovirus-based technology. The adenovirus-based technology is actually McMaster's solution from many, many years ago. And we also have deep expertise in mucosal immunity, and this stems from past research in tuberculosis. And so it was putting all of that expertise together to come up with a new inhaled type of vaccine, which gets directly into the lungs, to the mucosal surfaces, where we know that it is more efficacious. It also is different in that it has 3 different proteins, not just against spike, but against 2 other conserved proteins, which will allow for it to also provide immunity against variants of concerns or even new coronaviruses. And because of the nature of it being an inhaled vaccine, it only requires about 1/100th of the dose, which from a manufacturing perspective gives a great advantage. And so this is all from, past investments in our GMP facility and from the research within our group that we were able to develop this really new type of technology.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could, a subsequent question. You emphasized, Dr. Mossman, about how the Nexus project differs from the existing research ecosystem in Canada. And you referenced, and I specifically wrote it down, the right amount of funding will kind of get us to the next stage with Nexus. And so can you elaborate and further explain how Nexus differs from the existing research ecosystem, and what amount of funding were you referencing in your opening statement in that regard?
So our entire Nexus project is around $400 million. But I'm actually going to let Jerry, who's the lead of Nexus, talk about the unique ecosystem.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you for the question. And I'm really happy to tell you a little bit more about it. The Nexus initiative is really built on our experience in the Infectious Disease Research Institute over the last almost 20 years, where the emphasis has really been on interdisciplinary teamwork and bringing people together across disciplines that don't normally work together and providing rewards to do so. Some of those are obviously financial rewards that are frankly enabled by very generous philanthropic gifts that have pioneered our ability to do this cross-disciplinary work. Because as you've heard, it is very challenging, frankly, in the Canadian system to foster that. In fact, in university systems to foster that, because the rewards are primarily individual. And so the Nexus initiative is really built to be able to bridge all of those gaps, and through the development of teams, through the development of pre-existing collaborations, and as what Dr. Mossman said, both within the university and our partners in industry, government, and not-for-profit agencies across the globe. And that really provides us an opportunity to do truly agile, interdisciplinary work that is directly focused on impact.
My final question would be, through you, Madam Chair. I know that in my time as a councillor in Hamilton, I had the honour and the privilege of working with McMaster and other partners to bring the Health Science Centre to downtown Hamilton. And with that, I believe there were 400 positions that came with that new building, and the investment that the city supported, I know the province supported, and we had a philanthropic donation, of course, I believe from Mr. Braley on that one as well. And so that brought many funding sources together, and I think one of the goals and objectives was to retain, some of the talent that is making its way through McMaster and some of our other institutions, not just in Ontario but across the country. Can you, Dr. Wright, expand upon how Nexus will help us retain that Canada's top talent, not just with your project here, but maybe in the city and beyond its borders?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. Thanks for the question. We're very excited about the initiative, and we're purposely locating it at our McMaster Innovation Park, where it is surrounded by opportunities to develop startup companies and what have you. And so part of our goals is to provide a seamless opportunity to translate research from the laboratory into application by co-locating it in such an area. And I think that will be a pretty significant issue. And as Dr. Mossman indicated, the idea is picking up steam, and we've actually been able to not only retain but repatriate 3 outstanding Canadian researchers from the United States who are coming back to Canada, back to McMaster to set up their laboratories to contribute to our Canadian research enterprise
Dr.
and our
Wright,
Canadian
I
economy.
hate to interrupt. This is
Thank you,
so,
Dr. Wright.
It's so interesting. Thank you, Mr. Collins. We will now go to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I'd like to welcome the witnesses that have joined us on the second part of tonight's meeting. My question is for Dr. Naylor. Thank you for being with us. In 2 months, it will be 5 years since you presided the work that has led to the Naylor report. It aimed to have a strategy to increase investments in research, but also to improve coordination in granting counsels, and also to create a consultative committee on research and innovation. Among the recommendations that were made in the report, do you think that the actions of the government since its publication have been sufficient to help Canada catch up on research and innovation in the last few decades?
For the question. I've had the privilege through the years of doing a few reports for government, and I learned a long time ago that your batting average is never 100%. There will be some recommendations that stick and others that don't. And I would say that by the measure of past experience, I thought many of the recommendations were acted on. The funding that flowed was hugely appreciated by the community. It did not rise to the level we had hoped, but it was certainly generous, and I think it made a real difference. I do wish that an oversight body like a Council of Science and Innovation or a National Advisory Committee on Research and Innovation had been created, and I think that is a missing piece of the ecosystem to knit things together. And I also think that now that we are past that 5-year mark, it really is time for us to reconsider what investments we need to make, remembering that the budget that followed on that report had a limited lifespan for further investments. We had a very generous budget in 2021, but it was also very focused on specific areas. So now we need to get back to basics and think about how to support the broad range of disciplines and institutions of all types and sizes to lift all boats as best we can.
Thank you, Dr. Naylor. Are there any other recommendations that have not been implemented and that would be urgent, according to you?
There are certainly elements such as the review of the governance and harmonization that I think is not as urgent, but would be a nice to have. I think that's certainly one thing that is worthy of consideration. I do take the point raised earlier about the need for a big science oversight mechanism. We really need to have outstanding facilities at scale to compete internationally. We also need to know how to pick them and how to invest in them, but we also need to know how to decommission them and wind them down if they have to be wound down. So I thought that was a very good point made by my colleague, and I think that that's another one that needs fairly urgent attention, given how important big science is to the success of this country on the international stage. But by and large, as I said, a wide-ranging response that we appreciated on the panel. A few things that I think merit urgent attention, but the biggest issue, we need to reinvest now to keep up with our peer nations, to lift all those boats, to help the next generation of bright young Canadians across all backgrounds. It really is about equity and excellence together so we can succeed in the years ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Naylor. One of the important recommendations from your report was to reinvest significantly in research. At the time, we had a 4-year time span. We were looking for a 0.4 increase of the budget. So in 2022, 5 years later, what's your analysis of the investments that have been made in research and innovation from the federal government?
Thank you very much for the question. I think that we made up a lot of lost ground, and I want to emphasize that. It was very important but I think we didn't catch up as far as we needed to. The most recent budget was completely understandable. It was a pandemic budget. It was highly focused. It made a lot of important investments. So I think that it would be inappropriate to be critical of a very strategic set of decisions, and generous investments were made, mostly on a one-time only basis. We do, however, need a multi-year plan to reinvest now, to build on a steady basis, provide a stable platform for the next generation of scientists and scholars. That, I think, is what is necessary now.
Thank you, Dr. Naylor. Of course, you were talking about having a plan, having a vision. But short term, beyond the report that you published, what would you recommend? What are the opportunities in science, innovation, and research that the federal government can include in its vision to make sure that we're competitive on the international stage and to catch up the delays that we had in the last few years?
Dr. Naylor, a short answer, if you can.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. First, there are so many areas of exciting opportunity. We're back to that challenge of picking winners. And I think the whole point of having a broad-ranging investment in fundamental science and scholarship is to let the winners emerge, not only through the process of peer review, but in the broader marketplace of ideas and inventions and discoveries that determines the flow of science. So I am actually very optimistic that if we make broad-ranging support for the granting councils a priority, those areas will find themselves. We picked a few areas already. You know, they're obvious: artificial intelligence, quantum, and so on. We made a big bet on building pandemic and infectious disease capacity. I think this will unfold well in the years ahead if we make a sustained broad investment.
Dr. Naylor, thank you. And thank you, Monsieur Blanchet-Joncat. You can see the interest in the committee in this subject area. And we will go now to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for being here before us. I'm just going to continue with Dr. Naylor, and this has been brought up a couple of times, so I don't want to be hammering it too much, but you know, this business of your recommendation of a National Advisory Council on Research and Innovation. The CSI was announced a couple of years ago, the Council on Science and Innovation, that seemed to have that same role. There was a secretariat created, but it doesn't seem to exist. I just wonder if you have any insights on where that initiative is, or if it is off the table now completely.
Thank you for the question. No, I have no special insights.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on then. I just wanted to maybe give you some more time. There was a big question that Monsieur Blanchet-Joncat asked about, you know, where we stand with compared with the rest of the world, different countries. You mentioned Germany. Big increases, annual increases over the past decade or more. Where are those countries putting that money? You know, is that just pure research money like NSERC or CIHR, SHIRC, or is that those funds, does that include private investment? I'm just wondering what the government should be doing, where, you know, maybe we are doing the right thing, but just not at the level you think it should. Just some international insights, I guess, is what I'm looking for.
Thanks very much. There's a bit of an echo. I'm not sure if we can stop that, but I do think that there has been an interesting mix in terms of how countries have approached their reinvestment over the last number of years. The 3% refers really to the core in Germany, but remember that they structure their research on institute lines as well as having granting councils analogous to ours. So it's a blend. In like fashion, if we were to look at Canada, I think we need a blend always. We need to support open-ended, discovery-oriented, blue sky, however you want to describe it. The free flow of imagination in all disciplines is so essential to create a better future for the world and for Canada. and also to allow young minds to flourish. But I do think some targeted areas are important. I think we all understand Canada has to make some bets in particular areas. We've done that in a few places already effectively. So it has to be a blend. The last thing I would simply say is we have NRC reinventing itself. There's money that's being set aside for a new CARPA, I think is the acronym for it. We have to figure out how to link entities like NRC and CARPA to the upstream ecosystem to create a really positive flow and interchange between research and development and innovation. Again, oversight through some type of body would help, but we need a plan, we need a vision, we need stable long-term support, and we need to make sense of how that works together in the broad public interest.
Okay, thank you. And Madam Chair, I think I'll just cede the rest of my time. The bells are ringing here, and
thank you,
I
Mr.
think our minds
Canning.
are turned elsewhere, but I just wanted to thank the witnesses for their testimony here.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. And yes, I think all of us would like to thank all of the witnesses, and the echo you hear is bells, and I'm sorry for that. But I think all of us in the committee would really like to say thank you. This was tremendous, and we're very grateful for your testimony tonight. And to our outstanding colleagues, thank you for being so excited and being part of this inaugural committee. And with that, I'm afraid that we will have to finish for the evening. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Adjourned.
Thank you.